Memento Mori! Or remember you have to die, to the common plebeian that can't read Latin. The deadest language still in use for a bunch of shit because of reasons, is actually meant to be an ancient pep talk. In a modern day stoic sense, it is used to manage your own expectations of life in general. Having a bad day? Memento Mori. It's never going to be quite as bad as the end. Having a good day? Memento Mori. Don't waste your time on too much celebration, you uppity prick. Knowing our own mortality is arguably the most human aspect of our species. It is definitely the only thing that we have in common with each other without exception. That and the devastating pain that can ruin a good week by stubbing your toe off the coffee table in your living room when you too quickly rush to the door out of anticipation for your pizza delivery, only to find that it is a parcel for your neighbour, while your toe curses your existence. It's hard to get over this fact. The human condition is our inability to ever really put that into the back of our minds, historically speaking anyway. Wanting to be remembered, wanting to live a meaningful life, wanting not to waste your life, whatever that means. Like the song says, nothing really matters. Thanks, Freddy. I guess we all sometimes need to hear it. That being said, there is some caveats to existential nihilism before you get on the bandwagon of rioting for the sake of riot's sake. Riot's sake may have to be the name of my first album, but I digress. What in the arse are you meant to be?
Hi, I'm Death.
You're clearly not though, are you?
What do you mean? Look at my hat and my gestures.
You're quite obviously me with a bit of face paint on.
No, I'm not.
Why are you lying? There's evidence everywhere.
I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you playing at?
I'm a metaphor.
Of what? The dangers of online porn addiction?
In a way.
Really?
No, of course not. I'm your existential nihilist dread that you get once every 3 months or so.
Oh, you do look quite familiar actually. It has been a while.
3 months or so.
Wow, time flies when you're trying not to think about your own mortality on a floating rock hurtling through space.
That's the nature of time, I'm afraid.
What do you want?
Not much. Just thought I'd remind you to try to eat less carbs. You're probably due for a haircut. Now the barbers are open again. Oh, yeah. Also, you're going to die at some point and nothing matters. So all the plans you have for life is a waste of time. So you might as well just give up on all of your hopes and dreams and aspirations.
Yeah, I thought I needed a bit of a trim, to be honest. And carbs are everywhere. It's like trying to dodge water in a rainstorm. You know what I mean?
What about the other bit?
The hopeless rhetoric about my mortality?
That's the one. Yeah, it's a stumper, that one, isn't it?
Well, if truly nothing matters, then the stuff that I do in life, however small, is the benchmark of my existence. This in itself has given meaning to where there was none before. Whatever your belief system might be, there is always the fact that you live your own life in the narrow parameters we have as mortal beings, which means that life is only meaningless if we don't exist. Inherently, there is meaning in life from your own perception of reality, because you're experiencing it, even if in the end, it is a hopeless fight to the end.
And you're okay with this?
I guess so. We're all in the same boat, so there's no FOMO. I mean, all life is the same when you really get down to it, right?
I'll see you in a few months to see if you have changed your tune.
Be seeing you. My experiences with death, on the whole, have been few and far between, thankfully. But run-ins with old Grim is never fun. When I was 3, or thereabouts, I killed my first pet. Now, before you call the police, and or the RSPCA, it was an accident. It was a rabbit by the name of Charlie. I was playing with him in bed, where he then wet the bed. I, at the time, was also a fellow bedwetter. I did what all bedwetters do, and tried to hide the evidence. 3-year-old logic. Instead of putting the rabbit down, I was carrying him and trying to change the bed at the same time. Again, 3-year-old logic. Unsurprisingly, Charlie wanted down, so he wiggled out of my arms, and fell headfirst onto an old wooden block that had holes drilled into it to hold pencils. Luckily, it was empty, so it was just quick blunt force trauma that clicked this poor creature out of existence. If it had been full of sharpened pencils, I feel the story would be just a tad bit more traumatic, for me and the rabbit. I vividly remember standing at the top of the stairs, calling for my mum with a limp rabbit body in my arms. Come to think of it, it might actually be my first memory. We lived in an upstairs maisonette at the time, so we buried him in a local park in a shoebox. In hindsight, this was basically just just feeding the foxes, but I think my mum could see I felt guilty, so a proper send-off was needed to alleviate the internal pressure. I want to make a comparison between nostalgia and grief here, because both stir up the same source of emotion. The main difference between the two is that nostalgia is self-inflicted pangs of loss, while grief is something you have to push through to get to the other side. At such an early age, they are one and the same. The child's brain hasn't developed yet. It is why childhood traumas stay with you for so long, if they ever are exercised at all. Fun fact connected to that, it's why school seems like it goes on for an eternity. Being trapped in double science limbo on a Friday afternoon. Honestly, what sadistic fucker planned that for a bunch of 15-year-olds? While later life whips by you like air on a dog's face stuck out of a fast-moving car. I say this because I turned 30 this week. No. Existential nihilist dread is creeping in.
You called. What's up? What just happened? What did I miss?
Fuck off, Death!
Oh my life. A talking cat. That's shocking. Fucking cats.
I've had a couple of close shaves myself, but that's the thing with dying. It's something that happens to you, but you're not affected by. The afflicted are the ones that survived the person that got off the ride. So I'm going to gloss over my near-death experiences throughout my life, which there are far too many, and highlight the tumble dryer of an experience that was the summer of 2014 to the summer of 2015. I was nearing the end of my final year of a degree when my dad died. There's never a good time to die, but those that knew my dad can agree his timing was always awful. His funeral was the day before my degree show, where you as a young professional are meant to mingle with industry people to secure future connections and work in your desired field. It was meant to be a celebration of creativity and hard work, where you could celebrate your peers and your peers could celebrate you. It was meant to be a good day. It was not. His funeral was an odd experience because it was the first one that I'd ever been to. I had no clue how to act, so I turned to humour, because of course I did. Though the thing that struck me was that I didn't know half the people there. You can look at this two ways. One is seeing the far-reaching ripple effect of life lived reaches beyond generations. We all forget that our parents lived lives before us. While the other one is, who the fuck are all these strangers? In hindsight, I see the more optimistic view, but at the time you can guess which one came to mind first. The thing is, my dad's death wasn't at all surprising. The doctors had given him a year to live, then he went on living for another 10. Though there is a lot to be said for the word living. Such are the woes of living a life in the shadow of addiction, but that needs a deep dive in and of itself. Grief had played its way through my immediate family for a whole host of different reasons and perspectives, for a long time before the end. It's a different ballgame when someone finally dies, compared with the bleakness of a surprise enter name here just died. So our collective experience may have been somewhat suppressed by circumstance. Shortly after his death, his first grandkid was born, my nephew, a cute ball of potential who has turned out to be quite a fun little human. It was only roughly 6 months later that my dad's dad died, my granddad, who had had a bad flu that took him in the night. The grief of losing a grandparent that has lived a full and interesting life, with an amazing legacy of children and grandchildren in their wake, is more a celebration of life than it is of mourning the lost. His funeral was a good party, and they knew how to throw a good party. Apart from the overarching sadness of the day, it somehow managed to be nice. The contrast between the way life was lived in the father and the son was stark. The Great Leveler has the ability to give you clarity in your own life, especially when you have two examples in front of you that are so different from one another, yet are about the same thing. It was only 6 months after that my friend Sal died. This one blindsided all of us. There wasn't one of us out of his friends and family that didn't react viscerally. It was meningitis that took him within 3 days of symptoms appearing. A few of us were at the hospital when he exited stage right. I remember thinking that it didn't look like him, like his mum wasn't holding him in her hands in front of me. I guess it was my mind trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't a man that had lived most of his life as an addict in some fashion or another for the better part of his life. It wasn't a man who had seen a world war and lived to create so much life. This was just incredibly unfair. He was a year younger than me, not that you'd know it to look at us standing next to each other. Handsome, athletic, one of the most compassionate people I've ever met, and dead, as life was about to kick up into the next gear for him. I had a very stunted emotional response to this. After we got his mum home, one of us stayed with her, while me and the better half went home. I started to play Minecraft of all things. At some point, I started to silently cry while I played. I didn't even know I was crying when I got a hug that lasted the rest of the night. Since that night, very unrelated things can make me cry. Recently, there was a YouTube ad that lifted you into space and you could use your phone to look around as the Earth gets further away. I blame Sal's death for opening a door of a deep well of emotion that I didn't know I had inside me. Because as bad as it may sound, my dad or granddad's death didn't hit me half as hard as this one did. That week, I also had to put my dog down. It was originally my dad's dog. By that time, I was pretty numb. As weeks go, that was probably the weakest weathered week weathered within. This brings me onto the different levels of grief you can feel. Our identities are made up of layers. Like Shrek, we're all onion ogres. At the core, we have who we believe ourselves to be. Outside of that is the actions that we take in our lives. These two can butt heads with each other often. You can believe yourself to be a charitable person, yet never have given money to a homeless person. I know, massively reductionist, but you can draw on your own comparisons for yourself, because I don't know your life. The shell of your identity is how people see you, and by extension, how you see the people in your life. This means our identities merge with those around us, especially with our chosen families. At my core, I am the son of my father, and by extension to my grandparent as well. When they died, it was an internal core system shock, held together by the surrounding foundation of my identity. When the people you go out of your way to make part of your life die, a small part of your crafted identity dies too. Not to say that any losses are greater or smaller than any other, but your crafted identity loses part of its unity. It's a fuller break.
Come on, you have to have changed your tune after that.
For the last fucking time, fuck off, Def. You win. Perfect. The saying, and I paraphrase, in 100 years' time, everyone will be dead and no one will give a shit, is fast becoming untrue. This is because of the instant archive of your second self online and global tracking systems that turn your life into a series of statistics. That is definitely a video in and of itself. But the point at the moment is that there are potential parables from current science fiction, and I guess actual science, that we seem to be ignoring at the moment. The goal of finding immortality, whether technological or biomedical, could take away the one thing we all have in common. Shows like Black Mirror and Altered Carbon have touched on some of the potential problems that are curveballed in our direction. There's the somewhat more optimistic technological heavens, where you can upload your mind into the cloud as your physical body dies, and there's the more pessimistic views of technological hells, such as Northwest Kent. Whatever the flavour of your dystopia we land on, there is an argument for not opening the particular Pandora's box of eventualities. Could we even choose any other way if the choice arose? How would we deny humanity's biggest fear? See you next Tuesday.